This is the project we're going to do today. I'm calling this one Stairway to Heaven. And this was a video that was inspired by a scene that Kevin of Stampscapes.com did. And I wanted to take some inspiration from that scene. And his was specifically for a sympathy card. And so this one I thought would work well for a sympathy card for a woman that has passed away. And so let's begin. And I'm going to be stamping on a quarter sheet of Kromekote glossy cardstock, and I'll start by stamping the Blooms and Bridge stamp, which is number 221G. And I am going to actually stamp this in a brown color. So I'm going to use some Distress Ink Vintage Photo. Okay, and now I'm going to use this stamp, the Crepuscular Rays, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It's number 115G. And I'll ink this up with some Distress Ink Chipped Sapphire. Now I'm going to take my stamp chamois and I'm just going to kind of pat out the middle and the edges. And now I'm going to stamp some Tall Grass Small number 254B, and I will ink this up with some peeled paint. Alright, now I'm going to start coloring in the background, and I'm going to want to keep the center area light, so I'm going to want to stay aware of that, and also right below the sun, so this area here will also be light. So I'm going to start with Distressed Ink Tumbled Glass. Okay, next I'll do some Broken China. Okay, and next I'll do some Mermaid Lagoon, and I want to be really careful that I don't bring too much of the darker blue into the center part. And so to begin with, I'm only going to do it around the outside edges. Now I'm going to use my long skinny brush, and in these areas where it's darker from the stamp, I'm going to just start adding a little bit of the darker color where it's showing darker in the stamp. Okay, now I'm going to do some blueprint sketch, and this is really dark, so I want to make sure that I pretty much stay at the edges. Okay, now I'm going to use my smallest skinny brush to just add some color in this darkest region where the stamp is the darkest. Okay, for the ground area, I'm going to start with some Twisted Citron and just start bringing some green . Okay, next we'll do some Bundled Sage. And I'll use my long skinny brush to start defining the horizon line over here a little better. Okay, next we'll do some peeled paint. And I'll use my long skinny brush Okay, next I'm going to use some mowed lawn. Okay, and now I'm going to put on some forest moss, but this is only going to be in the very darkest shadow regions. So I'll use my long skinny brush for this. Okay, and I've lost some of the definition of the grass in the background, so I'm going to restamp that. And this time I'll use the forest moss. Okay, and I'm going to use my inexpensive alcohol markers that I've got to color in some of the features of this. And so I will start by coloring in the flowers. And I think I will maybe use a combination of number 33 and 35, maybe some 37. Okay, now I'll add in a slightly darker yellow. Okay, now I'm going to use a paper towel and just kind of buff this area that I've just colored in now. And for the bridge, I'm going to use some earth tony colors. So I'm going to use these colors here. And now we'll go in with the darker. And I'll use my warm gray 0.5, which is my lightest. And I want it to be a little darker. I'll use some of this dark brown here. And I'll blend this in with my light warm gray. And now I'll take my paper towel and just buff it out. Okay, and I'm going to have a blue-gray here so that I can put in some shadows. And I will take my paper towel and buff it out. Alright, now I'm going to take my white gel pen and I'm going to add some highlights. Okay, now I'm going to take some of my Hero Arts white pigment ink and I'm going to add some rays. So the point of these rays is going to come to the center of the sun, and I will just wad up a piece of paper towel and dab it on my ink pad, and then on the piece. Okay, now if this were a sympathy card for a man or a woman, the little girl here would probably be good for sympathy for the death of a lady, or this one right here might be good for the death of a man. And so we'll do the little girl right here. And I'm going to stamp her with some Versafine Onyx black ink. And so I am just going to ink up her and not the little girl beside her. So I will ink her up. Then I'm going to use my stamp chamois to remove the ink from the girl here. Okay, now I'm going to use my heat gun to try and dry the stamped girl that I just put on. Alright, the girl is almost dry, but I'm going to give her a few more minutes before we continue on, and we'll be back. Okay, I'm going to take my pigment ink again, my white pigment ink, and she's almost dry. I'm going to be very careful that I don't get any of this black ink onto my white pad, but I've crumpled up another piece of paper towel, and I am just going to start adding some mist. Okay, now I'm going to use some Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. And I'm going to just squirt some water into this little cap here. And then I'm going to take a small paintbrush and dip it in the Dr. Martin's and mix it up with a little bit of the water here. And then I'm going to just flick it. And now I'll really load up my paintbrush and just kind of dab my paintbrush here to splatter some more. Okay, now I'm going to take this big tree limb here, which is 203G, and I'm going to use my Versafine Onyx black ink, and I will ink it up. Okay, next I'm going to sign and date it. Okay, and I'm going to put my heat gun to this again to try and help the pigment ink to dry. Okay, and even with all that heat gun drying, it's still going to take a while for all this ink to dry. And so I'm maybe going to give it 1 or 2 hours to completely dry before we go on to the next step. And we'll be back. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes, and so I'm going to take it outside now, and I'm going to spray a very light coat of Krylon UV Resistant clear acrylic coating, and we'll be back. Okay, I've sprayed this with the acrylic coating. I'm going to give it a chance to dry, but one problem I've run into with this acrylic coating on these pieces where I have the Versafine Onyx black ink, I find that portion of the scene always stays kind of sticky. And I have found that if I spray a coating of workable fixatif on top of this, that will help take the stickiness away. But it does leave more of a gloss, more of a matte type of finish. So I'm going to give this chance to dry a little bit, and then I'm going to go spray some workable fixatif on it, and then we'll be back. Okay, I've sprayed it with the fixatif, and I'm just going to kind of pat this now with a paper towel because it's still a little bit sticky. And so I want to get the bulk of the sticky part. Okay, and now I'm going to go spray another layer of the workable fixatif on it. Okay, that second layer of the fixatif has pretty much taken away the sticky, but it's made it a little matte. This is probably good for most people, but I'd like it to be glossy. So I'm going to see what happens if I put another layer of the UV resistant clear acrylic coating on here. And hopefully it will not make this pigment ink sticky again, but we'll find out. Okay, next time I think I will not spray with the Krylon UV Resistant clear acrylic coating again after I've sprayed with the fixatif. The whole thing is kind of sticky now, which it wasn't before. And so I would just spray it with the UV resistant clear acrylic coating and then the fixatif on top of that, and not try and put the acrylic coating again. As soon as this dries a little more, I'll put one more layer of the fixatif on top to see if I can make this sticky go away. And we'll be back. Okay, I've put another layer of fixatif on top and it's not sticky anymore. So you definitely, if it's sticky after you spray with the acrylic coating, then you'll want to use the fixatif spray on top of that. And then you have to end with the fixatif spray, which unfortunately, as I said, it's a matte finish and I prefer glossy. But at least it's not sticky. And here's the finished scene. I've matted it on some, this is actually just white printer paper and then some black cardstock to finish the scene. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!